Where were you when you heard the news? Maybe you were right here in this room last Sunday. For me, it was last Monday morning. It was about 4:30, and I had awakened and groggily stumbled into the bathroom, and on my way back to bed, something called me to check my Facebook. And that's an odd thing. I don't do that in the middle of the night. I'm not one who's on Facebook all the time, but when I opened my Facebook account, I knew why, because there I had the message from Dee telling me about Sean's passing and asking if I could be here with you today. I want you to know that my heart immediately said yes. And my heart also immediately began to break for you. And I went into prayer. I can't imagine how you're feeling right now, each of you. Everyone different. You're all over the place. You know, you went to bed one night and everything was as it was, and you woke up the next morning and it was different. It was changed, and you couldn't have foreseen that change, and it was a shock. How could it have happened? And what begins to move through your mind at times like that is, oh my goodness, I wish I'd called one last time. Maybe I should have said something. Maybe that last time we connected, I could have said or done something different. And what I want you to know is there's nothing you could have said or done any differently. Life, as somebody told me earlier today, life isn't fair. It just is. It just moves on, and so we move through it together. I personally never knew Sean. I've got to listen this morning to his beautiful music, as you did too. And I've read and heard so much about him. I've read and heard about how unconditionally loving he was. Did you see those words written by Keegan about his dad? What a beautiful thing to say. And how committed to his spiritual path he was. What a quick wit he had. How when we would pray in, you would pray in the morning before service, he'd say, "Go team," you know. How one person said she never saw him without a smile. And I understand that his hugs, well, evidently they were pretty remarkable. So I imagine some of you knew him very well. All of you knew him in some way. And your grief is unique to you. And then everyone in the room, oh my gosh, you love Sue. You know, she is such a light. I remember the first time I ever encountered her. We had not met before, but we were attending some sort of a meeting out at Unity Village. I believe it was a regional conference, and I looked across the room, and there was a table full of people. I was at my own table of people. I looked across the room and saw this woman with such charisma just sitting at the table. Even though I couldn't hear her, I could just feel her charisma. You know, charisma, the presence of the Christ radiating out. I could feel that from her. And I said, I have to meet her. And of course I did. She's such a light. And I know you hurt for her and you want to just scoop her up and do what you can for her. I asked her if there was anything that she wanted me to say to you today. And this is what she said. She said, I guess maybe tell them that I'm struggling with this loss, but that I know that time will bring healing, and I know that Sean is free from the disease that truly tortured him daily. He's totally free and loving all of us. His beautiful voice can now be heard in the laughter of children, the singing of the birds, the rippling of a stream, and the beautiful sounds of the wind blowing the trees. Whenever you hear something beautiful, you hear Sean. And then last night, she sent me another message, and she said, one more thing, would you just tell them thank you? She said for me to thank you from the bottom of her heart for all your loving messages and your support. And she said, we are feeling this loss as a spiritual family. And as a family, we will come through this together. I was reading in one of my very favorite books that really plumbs the depth of loss. It's called Seeking with All My Heart by Paula Darcy. I don't know if any of you are familiar with her writing, but she knows a bit about grief and loss. Decades ago, nearly 3 decades ago, I suspect now, she was in a tragic automobile accident with her husband and her little girl. She was pregnant at the time, and her husband and her little girl did not survive the accident. And so her journey to recovery from that loss prompted her to begin to lead retreats, to write books on loss and grief, and to find God in the midst of it. And so this book, Seeking with All My Heart, does just that. It's a series of readings. And one of the readings in the book is about a friend of hers who died suddenly, like Sean did, unexpectedly. And she writes, "When Randy died suddenly 2 years ago, it was a blow to many hearts. My friend Dave Peterson said it best, and I want you to hear these words. We weren't done with him yet. We weren't done with him yet." She says, not done laughing with him, creating with him, being mentored by him, delighting in him, not done being in the presence of a large and loving spirit, not done being drawn to something that was alive in him. Does that sound right? You weren't done with Sean. Life wasn't done with him. Sue wasn't done with him. Keegan wasn't done with him. All the people that know and love him were not done with him. And I have a comprehension of that. I remember about 7 years ago when, as I was the senior minister at Unity Church of Overland Park, one Saturday afternoon, my Sunday lesson was already prepared, and then I got a call. And I learned that one of our staff members, our director of volunteers, who was also a minister, Janet McNamara, had been on her way back from officiating a memorial service, and she was killed in an automobile accident. We weren't done with Janet yet. We weren't done with her. She'd just come on board and was captivating the volunteers and energizing the program. And Janet had been my good friend. We'd sat together in ministerial school. We were classmates every day for 2 years, from Monday through Thursday, from 7:30 to noon. We sat beside each other and studied and learned together. And now my friend was gone, and I had to get up the next morning and tell the congregation that their beloved Janet was gone. How was I to do that? Well, Kenneth and Dee found that out last week. I wasn't done with Janet yet. Nor was I done, as it turned out that within a month we lost another of our staff members. So I want to share some pieces of wisdom today that may be comforting to you, may help you as a community. It's already clear to me in the short couple of hours that I've been here that this is a strong community, that you're already uniting together. You've told me that, some of you very overtly. And so I want to offer you some words that might be supportive to you. And I also want to say to you that whether or not you knew Sean deeply personally, you've all experienced loss. And so you're all in this together. And the first thing I want to say to you is, don't compare yourself to others. There's a tendency to look around and watch how everybody else is doing it, like there's a right way. And there isn't a right way. There isn't a wrong way. There's only your way. You may have heard of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who was the great writer and researcher on death and dying, and she said that there are a certain number of stages that we go through in grief, from anger and denial and bargaining and depression and acceptance. And I do think most people go through those phases, but not necessarily in sequence, and everybody goes through it at their own time. Some of you are going to cry a lot. Some of you will not cry. I encourage you not to judge one another and not to think, sometimes we think that the number of tears that we publicly shed are a testament to just how much we love the person who passed or how much you love Sue. And that's not true. I trust and know that each of your hearts is going to maneuver and navigate this time with God and your grief in your own way. So resist the urge to judge. And do know that one loss triggers memories of another. I'll bet this week, Sue said so beautifully about how it is that maybe you've been reflecting this week. I'll bet you've had memories of other losses in your life. And not just losses of people who've transitioned, but losses of jobs or moving to another town, or any change in life triggers these steps of grief. So be gentle with yourself and be gentle with each other. It's a funny thing about our beautiful faith unity. Sometimes it can get in the way, and I'll tell you how if it's misapplied. You see, sometimes in unity, our faith tells us that the soul is eternal. Our faith tells us that Sean isn't separate from us. He's right here in the room. We know that. We know his spirit is here. And so if we know that life's eternal, why should we grieve? But that would be a disservice to yourself and to the people who know and love you if you didn't allow your feelings to come up. And sometimes also in unity, our faith is so strong that we want to affirm the positive. And we know that the thoughts we hold in our mind produce in our lives. And so we think, we can just do a spiritual bypass here. If we just slap a few affirmations on this, then we won't have to feel the pain. I call that spiritual bypass. And it doesn't work. You can slap the affirmations on. I could give you 10 or 12 right now. But you know what? It might make you feel a little better. It might really make you feel angry is what it might make you do. And it would make you stuff. And if there's anything I want to say to you today, it's don't stuff the feelings. They're there for a reason. They're there to help you actually as you listen to them. So the first thing is to simply know that grief is a personal process, and however you're grieving is right for you. Secondly, I want to say, and this comes from personal experience, don't take anything personally. You see, as people grieve in different ways, they may do and say things they wouldn't ordinarily do. The most outgoing person that you know might withdraw and kind of go missing. Hopefully not from the community, but may just turn inward. And somebody who's always peaceful might become irritable. And some of you in the room will simply overfunction. I understand that. You want to make a casserole for everybody in the room, right? If you just give them a chocolate chip cookie, they're going to feel better. So do that. That's okay. But my point is, don't judge how others are. Don't judge how they're behaving, and don't take it personally. And if they're irritable, and this may go on for a while, if somebody's irritable with you, it's not about you. It's always about what they're moving through. And especially with Sue, we don't know what Sue's going to need. I'm sure she'll try to tell you if she knows, but even she probably doesn't know and won't know. It'll be one day at a time for her. And so you're just here to hold space for one another, to not take it personally, to trust that God is in the middle of it somewhere. I remember I guess my first real experience of loss was when my husband's parents passed. And we loved Jack and Lily so much. And they died when we were young still. We were young parents ourselves, our children were young, and it just seemed so unfair. And Brian loved his parents. They died within, a year and a half or so of each other. And something odd happened. I didn't notice when it happened. I just began to feel that I couldn't connect with my husband. It's like he had checked out. And I took it personally and thought it was about me or about our marriage. I was pretty worried because I just didn't feel like we could connect. And I didn't know that it was grief. I didn't know that. But I still remember the day that he checked back in. All of a sudden, he asked a question about one of the girls' programs at school. And I couldn't tell you today what the question was. All I knew was that he hadn't really been able to fully attend to that level of detail for a while. And if he could ask that question, then he was back. And it was then, it's like all the dominoes fell and I got it. Oh my gosh, he's been withdrawn because he was in grief. Of course, that's what this was. So I'm trying to give you a heads up, and maybe you'll remember it when the time comes, to not take it personally and to not judge others for how they're experiencing it. You can be sure of one thing. Everyone in this room experiences loss a little differently. I will not say to you, I know how you feel, because I don't. I can never know. Third thing I want to say is don't rush the process. It takes as long as it takes. I remember when my own mother died, and I was so busy at work. I had such a busy job. I was always busy. That was my thing. I was always busy. So I just wanted to schedule a day to grieve. I hadn't really cried. And I went into my therapist and I said, I just need to schedule a day where I can just cry and get it out. And she kind of laughed with me and said, Patricia, it doesn't work that way. It comes when it comes. The sadness, have you noticed that over the week? You're laughing one minute, and by the way, laughter is good and it's okay. So you're laughing one minute, and then all of a sudden you see something, or you think something, and you think about Sean, or you think about Sue, or you think about the church, and it hurts. That's just the way it is. There's no magic. People say, well, it's a year, you grieve for a year. There's no magic number. There is a year of firsts, but there's no magic number. So it takes as long as it takes. And then I want to say to those of you who have children or grandchildren, to be honest with them. Our tendency is to want to protect the children and shield them from any unhappiness, any sadness, right? We don't want them to have to hurt. But the truth is, kids are very sensitive, and you know that. They're very sensitive. And so I want to encourage you that if you are sad, that you can say to your child, Mommy's sad because a really good friend died. Or Daddy's kind of irritable today because Reverend Sue's husband died. And I know that may trigger questions that you may feel you don't have the answers to, or you don't even want to answer, but walking through it with them, you see, you model for your kids how they will experience loss, because they will experience loss. They may or may not have really known Sean, but they watch how you experience it. And that's so important. When my in-laws died, I felt like I had to be strong for everybody. Like I wasn't supposed to show tears. That was in my naivete. I didn't know better, and so I was trying to be strong for Brian and trying to be strong for my daughters. And later, years later, my daughter Teresa said to me, Mommy, I thought you didn't love Papa because you didn't cry. Because she didn't see me cry. So I'm just encouraging you to be honest with the kids. If you happen to be a part of the youth program here, just be honest with the kids and let them ask their questions. Kids are more resilient than we are if they're given honesty. There's a lot more I could say to you today about grief, but as Spirit would have it, you've got the best coming next week, and that's Reverend Chaz Wesley. And he really is known as an expert in grief and an expert in loss and transitions. And he's doing a workshop, which you'll hear more about later on in the afternoon. So I encourage you to avail yourself of that, where you can share your feelings with him. When my friend Janet made her transition back in 2007, the volunteer director and staff member that I mentioned to you, another friend called me and left a voice message for me. And she said, Patricia, God has you. God has you. And what I want to say to you today is, God has you. God has this community. And we know that Spirit is more than an anthropomorphic God, but if you can just imagine the arms of God, the arms of Spirit, just holding this community. As I was talking to somebody earlier, what I said to them was, this has the opportunity to make you stronger. Every challenge does. Every pain does, if you walk through it honestly and, like your mission statement says, with authenticity, being who you are. So God has you. When I was reading in the book, Seeking with All My Heart, I came across a story that I want to end today with. because Paula Darcy, she's the author who had lost her husband and her daughter. And I can't fully imagine what that grief is, but she continued to look in her life for God in the midst of it, for signs that God was a part of the experience. And she tells about a time when she led a workshop, a retreat of some sort, and at the end people lined up to talk to her. And one woman in particular she noticed was standing for a very long time with these arm braces, and Paula kept thinking to herself, I wish she would sit down and I would come find her, but nevertheless the woman continued to stand in line for over an hour. And when the woman got up close to Paula, she looked her in the eye like she knew her, but Paula didn't recognize her. So let me read the way Paula described this interaction. And so the woman, "So," she beamed, "you made it." And this confused Paula because Paula didn't recognize her, but she kept looking at Paula with such love. The woman went on, "Paula," she said, 23 years ago, when your accident occurred, you were brought to the University of Connecticut Medical Center. To me, to my arms, I was your nurse." And then Paula writes, "That evening, this remarkable woman told me how she had cared for me and prayed for me. She told me how her arms, during the worst 10 days of my life, had tended me, how she had hoped against hope that I would make it, how she'd prayed that the flicker of light she'd seen in me would not go out. I was overwhelmed with the realization that those days for me had appeared to be totally and utterly dark. And if my life at that time had been depicted as a journey within a labyrinth, I would have insisted that particular section of the path was unlit. But that night, in a rare moment, I not only got to see that I was mistaken, I got to see the very embodiment of the path's light. It feels dark. You're searching for meaning, for why. I can't tell you why. I don't know why. But I do know this. I know that the light of Sean and the light of God's wisdom have not gone out, and they will not go out. Paula Darcy goes on to write, "Whether or not we are conscious of it, something holds all of us, and our way is ablaze." Something holds all of us, and our way is ablaze. She says, "We move within the embrace of brilliant light. In fact, without that light, everything would cease to be. What appears to be dark is only the density and error of our perception, not realizing that there are truths we are not seeing." Have you heard the piece of scripture where it says, "In him we live and move and have our very being"? Paula asks, what if we did know that we exist within a greater reality? That the words, "In him we live and move and have our being," aren't just words. I believe in you. I believe in God in you. And I believe that this community will be together in this journey. I'm sorry for your hurt, but please let it be. Feel the hurt as you need to. Let it be there and walk through this together. Because, as my friend told me, God has you. And when it feels too much, fall back into those arms. God has you. God has Sean. God has Sue. God has Keegan. God has Unity of Springfield. And God has each of you. And so it is. God bless you.